This is a Relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
Hey, Real Talk podcast listeners, we want to welcome you to a very special edition of the pod. It's been a while since we've put out a best of Real Talk, and in this all politics edition, we acknowledge that your time is valuable and there's a lot of polls on you, and sometimes, or even most of the time, you just don't have the time to listen to the full show every single weekday. So we're going to get into the moments that made news in some circumstances, that maybe influenced where files went, where stories went, both in our home province of Alberta and across the country. That's coming up in just a quick second. And typically, while I'm hosting the show, I don't have a chance to hang out in the live chat. I try to keep an eye on it on YouTube. This show's technical producer, John Hicks, does a great job of moderating. But here on this issue, on this episode, I'm with you in the live chat, hanging out, taking your questions, participating in the conversations. And I'm really looking forward to it on this special edition of the show. Now, it wouldn't be made possible without our friends at Rello, Alberta's top real estate school. And they're looking for those of you that are sick and tired of cubicle life. You're sick of your income being capped with limited earning potential. You're sick of showing up every single day for a boss that, quite frankly, just doesn't seem to appreciate you. Have you thought about a career in real estate? You can choose your course today at rello.ca. That's RELO.ca. They're going to help you study for your exam, get your license, and launch your career. And there's a great benefit for Real Talkers because you're seeing this on Real Talk right now. The special discount code Ryan100 is going to knock $100 off the Alberta Residential Real Estate Bundle and the Alberta Commercial Real Estate Bundle. That's Ryan100 when you get started today at rello.ca. Through this next hour or so, we're going to take a look at our top political interviews of the past couple of months. These are the newsmakers, the movers and shakers at the legislatures, at the House of Commons that are making decisions each and every day. What did they tell us? How did it play out? How did it land with you? Of course, the most prominent interview in recent memory on this show was February 21st, when the Right Honourable Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, joined me right here in our downtown Edmonton studio. We started off with a bang, touching on his poor polling numbers. And then we had to ask him about the pending sale of TMX.
It's been a tough 6 months for you and your government. The polls are predicting basically a bloodbath next election. Where's your head at?
My head's at what we're actually focused on doing, which is creating opportunities for Canadians getting through these tough times. Polls had me behind in 2015 before we won. Polls had me behind in 2019. Polls will always go up and down, and particularly at a time where people are hurting. People are facing real challenges, the global inflation crisis, the disrupted supply chains, the impacts of climate change. There's a lot of things hitting people, including, as you mentioned, the cost of housing and the availability of housing. These are problems that we're focused on trying to solve, and we're working on getting there with partners across the country. And I'm going to stay focused on that rather on the political polls that are, flowing a lot of ink.
These ones seem to be a little bit different, though. Like you've always been the personable guy. You've always been the likable guy. You've had the charisma, and that's carried you in past. But right now you're looking at your party polling 20 points behind the Conservatives. Your personal likability. When people take a look at your personal net approval of minus 33, it's got to get in your head.
Actually, first of all, I think one of the things that carried us through the past is what we actually did in terms of policies. People still think I won the 2015 election because of nice hair. What we won was because of the Canada Child Benefit, because of commitments to invest in communities, because of commitments to raise taxes on the wealthiest 1% so we could lower them on the middle class, because of commitments to fight climate change and put more money in people's pockets. And those are the things that we did. And while people talk about my appearance or whether they want to have a beer with me or not, I've got to stay focused, particularly in this time, on a world that's quite literally on fire in some places. We just declared wildfire season early here in Alberta, dealing with wars around the world, dealing with complexities in a transforming environment and economy, to actually keep Canadians successful, not just for the coming years, but for the coming decades. That's the job I'm doing. It's not a popularity contest. It's about delivering every single day. That's the thing that drives me. If I wanted to be popular, I wouldn't have chosen politics. If you want to get things done to build a better country, that's why you get into politics.
And you've promised one of the biggest government-led asset sales in Canadian history. That, of course, is the Trans Mountain Pipeline. It's gone over budget. Soon, capacity to get Alberta crude to the coast will be tripled. It's expected that Canada will take a loss on the sale. We don't know for sure yet. What will mark, in your mind, a successful investment? How will you evaluate that investment when it's all said and done?
First of all, buying the Trans Mountain Pipeline wasn't about hoping to turn a profit for the government. It was about making sure that Alberta crude was not landlocked, was not prisoner to one single customer in the United States. I took a lot of grief across the country for buying a pipeline, but I knew that if we want to be able to pay for the innovation, the transformation of our economy to be greener, to be cleaner, we need to get the best possible price for our oil products now. And that means getting out across the Pacific. And that meant twinning the Trans Mountain Pipeline. That's why we bought the pipeline, because it was good for Alberta and it's good for the country. Now, it is finally about to be completed, and that'll be good news for the industry. And now the government shouldn't be in the business of owning or running pipelines. We had to secure it. We had to de-risk it so that it could get completed. Now that it's about to be completed, we're looking at hopefully being able to sell it to Indigenous partners so they can actually benefit from it in a way that Alberta's actually done a lot of over the past years. This is a good step around reconciliation. It's a good step around making sure we're getting a better price for our oil while we look at innovating in ways that we can actually grow the economy and protect people in the future. The problem I have with the oil sands, or had with the oil sands over many years, is that people were doubling down and not preparing for the future. And that perhaps was something that a company can pivot off of in a decade or two and just change their investments. But Albertans working in the oil sands, they need to have other jobs that they can do. And that's why our investments in things like hydrogen, like Dow Chemical, our investments in sending renewable money into Alberta to innovate is so important. I was talking with the Alberta Business Council just last fall, who were really frustrated about the pause that the Alberta government put on renewables investment. Hopefully that is going to end next week, because Alberta has always been leading the way on investments. And the secret of that environmentalists in Canada don't necessarily want to acknowledge is we don't get to reach our targets. We don't get to thrive in a net zero world as a country unless Alberta is part of leading the way with the innovation, with the transformation, with the hydrogen, with the carbon capture, utilization, and storage, with the kinds of solutions that Albertans have always brought forward on energy. Canada can and should be the reliable provider of net zero energy in a net zero world by 2050. And if we're going to be that, we need Albertans to be thinking and working on that every single day. And having a government in Alberta that won't even talk about the reality of climate change is putting the brakes on making sure there are good jobs for Albertans in the energy sector for decades to come. That's what I'm focused on. And the fear-mongering and distraction of the right is actually harming Albertans' approach.
Yeah, so what can you do about that? I mean, I'll note that we're at time here, so your team can come yank you if they need to.
This is a good conversation.
Okay, I want to acknowledge that because you catch more. It's obvious. I mean, I don't know if you read the comments, even when we promote your appearance here on the show, you catch more heat out of Alberta than anywhere else in the country. But you're here banging on the table. Yeah. Your enthusiasm is palpable. But you and I both know you're still not going to get a lot of credit from the Premier. You're not going to get a lot of credit from people that are working on the drilling rigs right now.
If I was worried about credit, if I was worried about credit, I never would have bought the Trans Mountain Pipeline. I would my Eastern urban environmentalist voters would have said, yeah, no, great. I took a huge hit in the teeth for buying that Trans Mountain Pipeline because it was the right thing to do for the country, not because, maybe I could win 2 or 3 seats in Alberta. In 2015, when we won 4 seats in Alberta, it was because for the previous 5 years, I was showing up in Alberta 2 or 3 times a year, meeting with people, talking about the challenges, talking about how important Alberta's success is to the rest of the country. Now, yeah, maybe I start with a huge disadvantage because my last name is Trudeau, and people are ready to just, automatically ignore me anytime I show up anywhere where they don't like me. Fine. But I am not going to stop showing up. I am not going to stop investing in Alberta. I'm not going to stop making sure that the country sees that Alberta also has a lot of thoughtful progressives that want to fight climate change, that see the opportunity and the prosperity that comes in from being smarter about carbon emissions, creating technologies that the world's going to rely on, and make sure that as the world reduces its consumption of barrels of oil in the coming decades, there is still room for Alberta barrels of oil to be part of that solution, because we have successfully decarbonized, because we have higher labor standards, because we have higher environmental standards. Those are the things that consumers around the world are going to be focused on and worried about, and that's where Alberta gets to build that success and that leadership in Canadian energy for decades to come, because the world is changing, and it's not a plot by Eastern bastards. It is a focus on where are the global investors coming in? What are they looking at? The world is looking at net zero right now. Alberta can be part of that, but right-wing ideology is getting in the way of Alberta's success right now. That it's a flip around of the old thing. Governments should get out of the way of Albertans actually innovating and creating that better future that they can work and build and deliver. If you can build a pipeline for oil sands oil, you can build a pipeline for hydrogen. If you can build the technology necessary for an oil sands refinery, you can build the technology necessary for a hydrogen plant. These are things that Albertans will have great jobs in the future if the Alberta government gets out of its ideological opposition to doing things that are good for workers, good for the planet, maybe not good for classic oil sands companies, except that they're also investing massively in decarbonization and renewables. This is the dynamic that, quite frankly, Albertans are getting fooled by right-wing politicians on.
I can already hear Premier Smith's response to this, and the oil companies' CEOs' responses to this, and they're going to say, did Justin Trudeau just tell us that government ideology needs to get out of the way of innovation in the oil sands? And I know that they're going to tear their hair out because they feel that it's you that's been imposing liberal ideology onto the oil sands.
So what have we imposed on the oil sands?
You know what? We got literally dozens, if not hundreds of questions people wanted us to ask you, and a lot of people working in traditional oil and gas still don't believe. As much as you pound on this table, as much as you talk about the personal political risk that you took investing in TMX, they don't feel like you've had the industry's back. They don't feel like you've had Alberta's back. And I don't
think the oil industry has had the back of the oil sands workers. I don't think the industry, by dragging its heels on decarbonization in some sectors. Some of the oil sands companies have been really innovative and are leading the way on that, and that is great. And we are encouraging them, and we're investing with them, and we're supporting them in decarbonization investments. But those who are crossing their hands and saying, you know what, the world's still going to need oil for another decade or so, another few decades. It's still going to need every drop that we can produce. So why would we raise our costs right now and invest in innovation when we can just do the same things we've been doing for decades and make profits? And the fact that we're going to leave people with a dirty mess and no jobs because we haven't prepared for the jobs of the future, well, that's a problem for the next generation in this community. My job as a company, as a shareholder, is to draw profits out right now. That is what is hurting oil sands workers, and they've been fooled by people who are saying, oh, no, the climate change is a liberal or a Chinese plot. You don't have to worry about it. Just keep doing things exactly as they were a decade ago, 2 decades ago. That's not preparing for the future that Albertans, like all Canadians, know is changing.
A short time after the Prime Minister was with us, Alberta's Premier, Danielle Smith, joined us in the exact same seat. We talked about a lot, obviously, But right around that time that we spoke, on March 14th, Alberta, her government had just lifted its 6-7 month moratorium on renewables development, new wind and solar projects. And of course, I had to ask her, with exploration continuing on coal in the Rocky Mountains and oil and gas obviously receiving the full support of the provincial government, why not the other alternative energy?
Obviously, oil and gas is incredibly important to Alberta. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows where you stand on it. Everybody knows where, in particular, Conservative premiers are expected to stand on having the back of oil and gas and being friendly with oil and gas. It appears that you'll bend over backwards for coal or support coal, but at the same time, there's like an ideological, or maybe not, I'm curious to see how you'll answer this, but like an ideological barrier that stops you from being bullish on wind and solar and other renewable forms of energy. This moratorium's just been lifted. There's new policy in place. Not everybody's satisfied. We got a lot of emails from people saying this is threatening billions of dollars in investment. How do you see the future of renewables in Alberta, honestly?
I should tell people where I sort of come from on this issue, because when I was in office the first time, I went down to the U.S. The State Department had me it hosted me to visit a number of different jurisdictions, and one of them was Montana. And what I learned in Montana was that their intermittent power, if it was going to be on their grid, they had to firm it up, meaning if you offer 50 megawatts of power, you've got to always offer 50 megawatts of power. That means you need to have partnerships with other types of energy providers like natural gas peaker plants, or you have to have reliable backup in terms of maybe a water battery storage like some jurisdictions have, or have a battery storage to be able to back it up. And so the problem that we have now is that there isn't any of that redundancy that's built into these types of systems. It's we now have a point where we're adding on potentially more solar and wind than we have baseload power to back it up. And we saw that on January the 13th, when at 5 o'clock at night, there was no solar being generated, 7 megawatts of wind being generated, of 6,200 megawatts installed. There were a couple of plants that, because of the mechanical, the weather, they were offline for whatever reason. But we had 12,252 megawatts needed, virtually all of that coming from natural gas, with a bit of a hand from Saskatchewan on their coal development. And so that's what we have to be concerned of. We have to manage the system so that we know that in the dead of winter, minus 35, when we have no wind or solar, that we have enough baseload to be able to back it up. So as long as we can make sure that they're developing at the same time, then we'll be able to bring on a responsible amount of solar and wind.
Yeah, Alberta's supposed to be the open for business jurisdiction, the no red tape jurisdiction, and this file just seems to fly in the face of that, you know?
Well, let me quote Andrew Leach. I know he's probably surprised I'm quoting him because he doesn't often agree with our government, but we have 33,000 megawatts of wind and solar in the queue and virtually no natural gas. So let's play this out and assume that I agree to all, the regulator agreed to all 33,000 megawatts of wind and solar. So then on January 13th, when it's minus 35 and there's no wind and no solar, we are just as hooped as we were right now. You have to have baseload power coming on. And I can tell you, when I talk to some of the natural gas generators, those who want to bring on new baseload power, one of the things they say is because of the federal clean electricity regs, because of the potential that this is going to have to be shut in or shut down in 10 years' time, we can't convince anyone to lend us money to build a natural gas station on that basis. That's why we're fighting with Guilbeault over this. If we want to bring on more wind and solar, we have to bring on more natural gas peaker plants to back them up. That's just the way our market works.
There have been a ton of reports, people can Google it, that Alberta's energy regulator has grossly underestimated the looming cost of cleaning up Alberta's abandoned wells, the so-called orphan wells. I got an email from Will who wants me to ask you, while the new liability management framework is nice in theory, what steps will the province take to help both the AER and the Orphan Well Fund actually enforce the regulations? I don't think Albertans have confidence in the energy regulator. I think Albertans are concerned and maybe don't even fully realize yet what this environmental liability looks like. How is it landing with you?
Well, I think it's about $30 billion from what I have seen. Whether that's low or high, I guess we have to do a little bit more work on it. And it's a huge liability. And you know what I've said is the framework we're putting in place for solar and wind, where they have to set aside a little bit of money each year of operation so that they have enough money for the reclamation at the end. That's probably the kind of proposal we should have put in place from the very beginning for oil and natural gas. Because the problem we have now is a lot of these wells that are inactive get transferred along with producing assets. And then if a company tips over and goes bankrupt, like Sequoia or Trident or Houston, there's any number of them, then those inactive wells go to the Orphan Well Fund, and then it balloons the costs that have to be paid for recovery. And we've got to deal with both those, the ones that are truly orphaned and the ones that are currently inactive. So we'll be talking with the energy industry about what we need to do on a go forward with new wells that are being drilled. Because, my preference would be to have parity in how we approach that. If we're going to be asking solar and wind to do that, we should be asking oil and gas companies to do that. That being said, that doesn't solve our historic liability issue. Our historic liability issue is one that we've mandated that companies have to spend 3% of their liability down every year. And it's now at $700 million. The first year, they reach that target. So we're going to keep making sure that they reach that target. So if you do the math on that, $700 million a year, it's still going to take 40 years to clear off that liability. So maybe we have to do a little bit more. But I came into politics as a landowner advocate in 1997. I have known of this inactive well problem for 25 years, and we're going to solve it because we have to. Because we are in a position now with the increase in oil and gas prices, companies are flush, they've got dollars. This is the time for us to start building out that secondary industry of making sure that we clean those wells up, develop the technology that then can be exported internationally, because every jurisdiction has this problem, and I think that we can be leaders in it.
On April 22nd, just before he addressed a packed house at an Edmonton Chamber of Commerce luncheon, Federal Jobs Minister Randy Boissonnault joined us in the Real Talk studio. We covered a lot of ground. You can check out the full episode in our archives, but we were curious to pick his brain. What are they saying around the federal cabinet table about that TMX sale, that big pipeline expansion that, triples the amount of Alberta energy heading to international markets, but also went way over budget. Some people are saying $35 billion construction costs. And will it ever be recovered? What will mark a successful investment? Some people are bullish on it, think it's absolutely an amazing idea. And on the flip side, probably the loudest criticism we heard from people was saying, well, you're using natural gas to get the hydrogen. It doesn't seem like it's as sustainable as it's being portrayed. We see this word greenwashing a lot. What's your take on the actual truth around and the future of hydrogen?
So if you asked me, do I want to see electricity or vehicles powered on a heavy emitting fuel versus natural gas turned into hydrogen, I'm going to pick the hydrogen every day. And in this part of the world, we're not talking about necessarily getting to the retail level. Like, do I expect to have a hydrogen car like Jonathan Wilkinson does in Vancouver? Maybe. But I do see entire fleets, like bus fleets. I see trucking fleets. I see heavy duty fleets converted over to dual use. So they can be on hydrogen or they can be on diesel. That saves a whole bunch of emissions. And it also shows that the technology works. And you want to talk about people and amazing jobs in our province and in our city, heading down this hydrogen path really matters. And look, it's like a way station. Like, we're going to see how the technology gets better. We got off coal. Think about that. We got off coal a lot sooner than we thought we would. Electricity grid didn't crash. In fact, we've got more electricity than we ever had before. Well, we have had some brownouts.
Yeah.
And that's why Danielle Smith deciding no renewables for 6 months was a devastating move. We've got to have stability and predictability in the sector. And what's in this budget, so let's pivot to the budget now, my friend. We've got tax credits in this budget for clean hydrogen, and we're going to double down on the tax credits that we had before. Carbon capture, use, and storage is a huge deal here in Alberta. Like, we're going to have the world's first net zero cement plant right here in Edmonton. We've got Air Products that's going to have the first net zero hydrogen plant right here in our city. And Dow, we put some money into Dow out in the heartland. That's 7,000 person years of work. That is a huge deal. It's a polyethylene net zero plant that's also going to scrub 2 megatons out of the atmosphere.
This the Dow deal is a big one. It's worth about $10 billion, if I remember correctly off the top of my head.
Absolutely.
People can Google it and check it out. Listen, hey, Real Talk, Pathways Alliance is advertising on this show. I think that I don't know, for whatever reason, I just think based on some of the feedback we get from people, it would mean more to some of our critics
to hear a Liberal cabinet minister comment on carbon capture than it would a Conservative MP. You know what I mean?
Well,
like people are just imply to us that it's like it's a partisan thing. Like Conservatives are going to be for carbon capture. You know, people on the left are the people that care for the environment, which I don't necessarily think is 100% true. I don't think that it's black and white like that. But I'm getting this recurring theme in emails from people that think that carbon capture is not a real thing. And then I hear folks like you imply that it has or could have a huge role in Alberta's economic future and have international implications. So, like, what are the straight goods from the federal job minister?
It's remarkable technology. It works. We've got an entire CCUS pipeline in this province. So that's another example of how we partner with the province. Look, we've got to use every tool in our arsenal to actually reduce emissions. It's there's no silver bullet. There's no magic solution here. Not only am I pro CCS, I was pro TMX and still am. And we're going to see TMX come online this year. And for the first time in our lifetimes, Ryan, we're going to get world price for oil here in Alberta. No more haircut from the Americans. That's good for the province's coffers. It's good for the federal coffers. But you know who else it's good for? Workers in the oil and gas sector.
So how does this work? Is it an uncomfortable relationship with you and your cabinet colleague, the environment minister, Stephen Guilbeault, who's not exactly like stoked about expanding new pipelines?
Not at all. Like this is what being a member of the Liberal Party means. Like we got not diametrically opposed, but some, pretty far apart positions sometimes. And we find the middle ground. And that's what I think we have as a country. Like sometimes we have opposing views, but we hash it out and we figure out, the right line. And I can tell you, when I put the money on the table and said, look, where else could we actually possibly get world price from oil unless we get another customer? That's why we bought the pipeline. And we're going to divest. Like Government of Canada is not going to be the long-term owner of this thing. You're going to see Indigenous participation in that ownership structure. And those conversations are happening right now. But I can tell you, when TMX turns on, it's a good news story for business and for workers.
Yeah. Are you involved in the sale of that? People are curious for an update. It's kind of funny because some people are like, well, the federal government never should have invested in it. Others, I think, begrudgingly acknowledge that the project probably wouldn't have happened if the feds hadn't invested in it. Yep. And then now people are concerned that, to shorten it and be concise in the argument, taxpayers are going to get screwed because the government's going to divest itself of its ownership at the time when it's not right to sell. So in other words, I guess some people who didn't want the government to buy it now want the government to hold it. Do you have an update on where that sale's at? And
the conversations are ongoing.
At the table?
So, look, here's my cue. If there weren't so many people interested in it, I would have said the asset had lost value. But my sense is that the asset remains very valuable. The contracts are there. The tripling of the pipeline is going to be full. And so that tells me that the asset is going to have value. Let's see what the final number is.
This episode of Real Talk is happening with the support of Canada's longest-running nonfiction film festival. That's Northwest Fest, which runs May 9th through the 15th at Edmonton's legendary Metro Cinema at the Globe, my absolute favorite place to watch films, especially documentaries. You got to check out their website, northwestfest.ca, for the full lineup. The world premiere of the cigarette surfboard, that impassioned surfer that created a surfboard from 10,000 littered cigarette butts. Ugh. They've also got I Have a Name, John Linton's soul-searching journey to grapple with the harsh realities of addiction and homelessness after losing a friend. Bill and Molly, an otter love story. Everybody who's seen this one absolutely loves it. They're screening the day Iceland stood still when all the women went on strike back in 1975. And don't miss the true crime thriller as well. This is a stranger than fiction story of a legendary New York video store, Kim's Video. All part of the lineup. You can check it out in full and get your tickets by visiting their website, northwestfest.ca. Our friends at Friesen Brothers want to remind you that the first of the month is approaching again, and you know what that means for families trying to stretch every single dollar. It's 15% off all grocery purchases of $75 or more. It doesn't get any better than that when you're looking for great food to put on that family dinner table, but you can't break the budget. I recommend that you check out their Family Essentials flyer online at Friesen.com. That's Freson.com. Our family loves this. They've got easy family meal solutions, quality food for everyday low prices at Friesen Brothers. Alberta grown and Alberta owned. And for those of you with real skills in the workplace, maybe you're an electrician, you might be an apprentice. Heck, if you're a solar PV designer, a system designer? Kubi Renewable Energy wants to talk to you. Check out the careers link on their website. They're also hiring in HR and sales and office management too. Why? Well, because they're Western Canada's busiest solar installer. And that means they need to staff up in their Edmonton HQ, their Kamloops HQ, their beautiful new Calgary office, and their Lethbridge office as well. Kubi is young, growing, and reshaping the energy portfolio in Canada. You can send them your resume today via the careers link at kubienergy.ca. I had never interviewed Osoyoos, as she corrected me, Osoyoos BC Mayor Sue McCordoff before, not until April 10th, her appearance on the show. This after a community member using their real name on an online forum essentially threatened to kill the town's CAO. Now, Osoyoos has seen a significant property tax increase, just like a ton of other Canadian communities, but Mayor McCordoff and her council were the first to really push back on the blowback, and she tells us why.
It's been very unfortunate. We started off by having quite a large tax increase, which seemed to spur everybody without reading the whys and wherefores into well, we don't do that, we don't like it, and so we're going to object violently. And there have been lots of things on social media sites that have been nasty, defamatory, threatening, and so we kind of try to deal with it, but we had to go further than that. We had to say, we sent a letter to SILGA, which is our Southern Interior Local Government Association, where we're going at the end of the month. And we said, we'd like to put forth a resolution. And it's just, we've done a little background information that the frequency and severity of personal and defamatory attacks towards municipal leaders, including council and staff, through various channels have created a hostile working environment and hindered the ability for us to do our duties effectively. The repercussions extend beyond the municipal realm and can detrimentally affect council members who are working professionals in our community. And they often infiltrate the personal lives of both staff and municipal council members, including incidents like at the grocery store where people, are given the finger or which is, totally disgusting. And I'm not saying that it's everybody, but there's enough that it's an uncomfortable thing. Let me tell you, I think it has died down quite a bit recently, and I'm hoping it continues to be that way. We have made some changes to our tax increases. We have lowered it. It's never going to be perfect. Who likes to pay higher taxes? We get it, but we're all in the same boat. And we need to make sure that we are looking after our community.
I'm just cherry picking one Facebook comment from one post. Okay, there's more than one, but there's a guy using his real name by the name of Liam Brennan who comments on a Town of Osoyoos post that says, when I'm back home, I will literally, he's talking about your town's CAO, right? He's talking about an official with the town. He says, when I'm home, I will literally find that grease ball, hook a chain around his ankle, and drag him behind my pickup truck back to Alberta. Like, if I'm the CAO of the Town of Osoyoos, I'm not showing up to the meeting if I don't know or can guarantee that Liam Brennan's not going to be in that meeting 15 feet away from me. Do you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. That's pretty disgusting. And that was why I said, after I heard that, because I don't go on Osoyoos Connect and read those, and my friends say, Sue, don't do it. They're nasty. You don't need to hear that. You don't need to see it, and so I don't. However, I did hear about that comment and about several of the others, and that's why I wrote the letter to the editor and why I went on a council meeting and I said, this is totally inappropriate and uncalled for, and it will not happen. And I have to tell you, our CAO, I talk to him all the time, want to make sure that he knows that we appreciate what he's doing for us. And And I get the same kind of comments as well. I know that. But that one was picked up and posted, and I'm glad his name is out there. That is absolutely disgusting. But some of our town staff have resigned, and they're looking for other jobs.
I just wanted to ask you about that.
Yeah.
I mean, and what about you? Like a 3-term mayor? What about you and probably people, I don't know your council too well, but folks that are doing a good job. You try to attract the right kind of people to politics. They come from all different backgrounds, and this type of thing. People go, why the hell would I ever want to participate in that?
Well, I've lived in this town. I've supported this town. I've worked in the town for over 50 years. I am not going to be intimidated by people who are not being considerate or polite. They're just being downright rude and nasty. I have a job to do. I've been on town council since 2011. As a councillor first and then 3-time mayor. I am not going to say, I don't like these things, I'm going to walk away. Not a chance.
If you're a regular viewer or listener of the show, you know that we've had you covered through the Alberta NDP leadership race. Just like we did a couple of years ago with the Alberta UCP leadership race, interviewing every single serious candidate. And that includes the former 3-time mayor of Calgary, Naheed Nenshi. The obvious question there is, since when were you NDP orange? People are saying Naheed's not orange, he's purple. He's the outsider. Is that part of the secret sauce, or is that immediately a huge challenge for you?
It's a bit of both, right? And I hope that people will follow my journey on all of this. So let's back up. We're using a lot of coded language, and I know anyone who listens to Real Talk is a political junkie and they get it already.
Sure.
But just to back up a little bit, when I launched in 2010, I launched with purple very much on purpose, because purple is not a primary color, it's a secondary color. It's a combination of red and blue. And what I was really trying to get at was not just that we need to meet in what I call the muscular middle, but also that we ought not to define ourselves by our tribes, that we ought to define ourselves by our common humanity. And so it may seem to folks who followed me for a while that jumping into orange is a bit weird. Jumping into NDP orange is a bit weird for someone who talks like that. And honestly, that was a big stumbling point for me as well. But 2 things really stepped out for me. The first is that as I talk to New Democrats across the province, and also as I talk to people who have never voted New Democrat across the province, I realized they were all saying the same thing. There was enormous commonality in what people were saying. We need to protect public services. We need to safeguard vulnerable people. We also need to grow our economy and build prosperity and support small business. We need to do so in a way that supports the energy sector and manages climate in a hugely proactive way where we can be world leaders. And we got to balance the budget. And I realized that these conversations were the same between NDP supporters and non-NDP supporters. And that really helped me understand that in Alberta, that orange color actually means something that's really close to Albertan values, and values, frankly, that the UCP government no longer holds. So can we bring a little purple into the orange? And if you look at my campaign website at nenshi.ca, you'll see that we have combined a little purple and a little orange. But I think more importantly, that purple is an invitation to people to open the door to the Orange House, to take a look and see if those values that the NDP represents in Alberta are their values as well.
When we talked to leadership candidate Kathleen Ganley, former Justice Minister, on April 19th, I had to ask her about the perceived frontrunner in the race, former Mayor Nenshi, and why she thinks that maybe he's not the best choice for the party. Why is it her? There is the big 3. The big 3 is Hoffman, Ganley, Nenshi, no matter what, which way you slice it. Where is Nenshi blowing it? Where is he missing the mark? Where is his campaign, in your estimation, dead wrong?
So again, I'll say I have a lot of respect for Naheed Nenshi. I voted for him 3 times for mayor. I think the challenge from my perspective is it's not totally clear to me where he stands on most provincial issues. And maybe I simply remain to be convinced. But I think that what we need to be doing is putting forward a concrete offer to people on the economy. And so that is what I'm going to do. I think in the last election, we did a very good job of prosecuting the case against the UCP. We did a very good job of telling people who Rachel was, and of elevating Rachel. And Rachel is amazing. I think that those were probably the right choices that we made. But the idea that what we need is just to prosecute the case harder against the UCP and to have a big name to lead us, well, we tried that already and it didn't work. So maybe it's time to try something else.
This may be revealing a Real Talk scoop, but I'm pretty sure that there's talk of removing the ban on union and corporate donations. The removing now, hey, maybe I'm messing this up. Maybe I'm wrong. We should have a weekly sponsored rumor mill segment here on Real Talk. You tune into the Real Talk rumor mill. Removing a ban on corporate donations might help the United Conservatives. Removing a ban on union donations would probably help the Alberta NDP. Where do you stand on this? I'm trying to read your body language.
So I am the person who introduced that bill in the first place. I am 100% in favor of it. I absolutely think that banning union and corporate donations was the right thing to do. I think corporations have incredibly deep pockets. They can just generate more and more revenue off, they can wind up in a symbiotic isn't quite the right word, but a co-relationship with the government who, gets fundraising from them and then changes the rules to allow them to generate more profit so they can donate more money. A union is interested in pursuing the interests of its workers. It will do that by way of politics, but they're never going to have the kind of deep pockets that a corporation has. And I think that citizens should have the final word. I think for me that is a fundamental value, and allowing corporations to come in and push their interests. I think that is bad for democracy and it's bad for this province.
This episode of Real Talk is happening with the support of our friends at California Closets, with custom closet and home storage solutions for your entire home. So it doesn't matter if you're trying to get your laundry room organized, you're trying to make the most out of that mud room or boot room, you'd love a garage storage system, or maybe you have relatives coming this summer, you have no idea where you're going to house them, and that Murphy bed idea appeals. The consultation is always free at California Closets. You can sit down with the designer, paint a picture of what you're looking for, tell them your budget, and then they'll come up with the game plan. Nobody does it better. And don't even get me started on the skill of their installers, the best in the business. And you'll find all the proof. Plus, you can request that free consultation on their website at californiaclosets.ca. If you're looking for a bit more of a mess cleanup type situation, we're talking natural disaster, the sewer backup, the flood, the fire, heaven forbid. For more than 25 years, our friends at Complete Care Restoration have been restoring property and rebuilding peace of mind. Professional, certified property restoration services in Edmonton, responding to central and northern Alberta 24/7. You can contact them by way of their website. You'll find them on the sponsors tab on our website, ryanjesperson.com. If disaster strikes, remember the name Complete Care Restoration. And with all this talk about environmental responsibility, talk of the changing energy demands around the world, Pathways Alliance is working with provincial and federal governments across Canada on a path to reach net zero emissions from oil sands operations. This is the 6 biggest companies operating in Alberta's oil sands. They're building a large carbon capture storage network that's going to reduce emissions. It's going to preserve existing jobs, and they believe it's going to create new jobs as well. They know for this net zero initiative to work, they need to collaborate with each other, with communities and governments. The world wants responsibly produced oil, and Alberta can provide it. You can find out more on how by visiting pathwaysalliance.ca. On February 15th, we talked to leadership candidate Sarah Hoffman, a former health minister. We talked to her about her campaign platform. It's the 3 pillars: health, climate, and housing. And I had to ask, why not affordability?
If you look at polling politically, affordability for people is top of the list. And as that issue becomes exacerbated and very much more real for people, in other words, we're talking dollars and cents every 2 weeks, and making tough choices on what you can pay for and what you can't, climate does bump down the list of people's top priorities, which is very interesting. I don't know if you have to work harder to get people to care about it, or maybe as a politician, maybe you have to talk about it a tiny little bit less, but still look like you're taking it seriously. I mean, how do you find the balance? I would love to have been in on the meeting where you said we need 3 pillars and only 3.
Yeah.
So what are the 3 going to be?
That's why housing's third, because it is absolutely the biggest expense that most people are struggling with right now. We have 100,000 Calgarians who are at risk of losing their homes. That is terrifying. And when it comes to affordability, keeping a roof over your head is the number one thing that people talk about feeling the pressure and pinch on. In Alberta, specifically in Calgary and Edmonton, rents are going up faster than anywhere else in the country. This is not fair. It's not sustainable. We need to make sure that we bring in temporary rent caps. And while we do that, that we actually build affordable housing and get enough stock, as well as permanent supportive housing, so that people can get off the streets, can get housed, and can have a better quality of life.
Temporary. I mean, income tax was supposed to be temporary to fund Canada's war efforts. Politicians, when they say temporary adjustments to markets or anything involving people's money, folks get nervous. Would you make a commitment that said we're applying a rent cap, an increase cap in Alberta, but give a date when it'll be lifted? Because a lot of people will see this as market interference, and there will be a lot of property owners, and you can hear all the tiny violins start to play, but it is a real thing. A lot of property owners whose costs are up in a big way, and they have no choice, they'll tell you, but to pass those costs along to their renters. This is a contentious issue. I know you know that.
I absolutely support the bill that Janice Irwin's brought forward around a 4-year plan, and the last 2 years are tied to inflation. I think that's fair and reasonable. Peter Lougheed brought in something very similar when, he was the premier and nobody called him a socialist. He was responding to an urgent crisis and needed to make sure that we kept people in their homes and made sure that we were building more stock. So that's why I want it to be for 4 years. I think we can build a ton of housing right across Alberta, including the house I grew up in Canuso was built through that Alberta first-time homebuyer program. We weren't the first people to buy it, but it brought more stock into our community, and eventually we bought that house from somebody who had been one of those first-time homebuyers. So there's lots of ways that we can address the housing crisis, but I think right now we are in a state where we need to put a pause on rates going up for folks who can't afford to keep a rental. That's not okay. Being housed out of your own city is not a solution. So being priced out of your own city. So we need to make sure that we have temporary rent caps and that we're building enough stock to make sure that we can address the affordability crisis.
So there's Hoffman's position. What about Jodi Calahoo-Stonehouse? Be honest. Had you heard of her before? She's a first-term MLA, and she is taking every opportunity to get her name out there by declaring herself a candidate for the NDP leadership. On February 28th, we connected with her, a wildly entertaining interview, I have to say. If you missed it, check our archive and listen to the full half hour. But we got a bit more of a sense from that rookie MLA on exactly what makes her tick. This conversation in Alberta about the environment and the economy. Yeah. And I think the most successful politicians have been able to convince the largest number of people that it's possible to prioritize both. But, you start talking like you're talking, and you're going to have a lot of people support you in a big way, and you're going to have a lot of people get really skittish, right? When you start talking about like emissions in Alberta's oil sands, all of a sudden people get really skittish, right? Yeah, the Prime Minister sat in the chair you're sitting in a week ago today and started talking about...
And you were very nice to him.
Oh, I was you shit disturber. Do you think I should have been harder on the Prime Minister?
I think you should be harder on every guest.
Okay, should I be harder on you?
Go.
Well, I'm having fun with you. I think people are getting to know you really well. I think we're having a nice conversation. I guess I could be more of a jerk, but what should I have asked the Prime Minister that I didn't ask him about?
I think you need to push him a little bit around the relationship with Alberta. He did talk about it, but let's talk about real investment in Alberta. They were here talking about housing investment.
Yeah.
Let's talk about numbers. What about the healthcare? What are those agreements? Let's talk about all of our agreements with the federal government? How are they going to improve the relationship with Alberta?
Okay, so you're not rolling in here and acting like Danielle Smith is combative with the federal government. I mean, it's probably going to be a Poilievre government anyway by the time this is all said and done. But you're not going to roll in and act like you're going to play nice.
If anyone should not trust the feds, it's the First Nation Albertan. Like, let's be clear. If anyone shouldn't trust them. However, we are Alberta. We are part of Canada. And again, back to relationships. We want outcomes. I don't care about being friendly with anyone. I want to see outcomes. I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to make change.
Now, we'll acknowledge that you're not hearing a highlight or seeing a highlight here from Raki Pancholi, the Edmonton Whitemud MLA. Of course, shortly after we spoke with her, shortly after Naheed Nenshi declared his candidacy, she pulled out of the race and endorsed him. So, being that this is a best of staying on top of where things are at, we thought we'd explain why you're not hearing or seeing Raki Pancholi in this lineup. We are going to bring you this, maybe the soundbite of all sound bites through our coverage of this leadership race. It was March 26th on this show when the president of the Alberta Federation of Labor, Gil McGowan, talked to us and, in a way, compared himself to Peter Lougheed.
I've been focusing on what's happening in the global energy markets for more than a decade. And when you hear that phrase, energy transition, it is not just an environmentalist slogan. It's actually a description of what's actually happening. And as an oil and gas producing jurisdiction, that has huge implications for us. And so not only would the New Democrats benefit from having me as their leader to stand up for workers, bring them into the coalition, give them something to believe in, so they join the coalition so we can beat Danielle Smith in 2027. But it's almost like the title of your show, Real Talk. That's what Albertans are craving right now, real talk on the economy. And the real issue on the economy is the energy transition. No one's talking about it. It's the elephant in the room. But today, in about an hour at my launch, I'm going to release the first plank in my platform, and that is focused squarely on the economy. And basically the message is that we have to pivot our economy towards new opportunities in the lower carbon future. And this is not a radical idea. Like I know sometimes people say, Gil McGowan, radical socialist. But what I'm suggesting is that we actually take a leaf from our past here in Alberta. In particular, what our province needs is its next Lougheed, because we're at another...
Are you the next Lougheed?
Well, I would like to be. I'll be honest. Okay, because
what do you and Peter Lougheed have in common? Serious question.
Well, in two words, industrial policy, right? Because when you look at the Conservatives, what they're offering is warmed over, trickle down economics. So tax cuts for the rich, deregulation, privatization, suppressing worker wages. That's what trickle down economics is. And it's a failed approach that has been tried by conservative governments all around the world. And it's resulted in lower wages, lower investment, lower economic growth. The alternative to trickle-down economics is not socialism or communism. It's government-led industrial policy in the public interest. And that's what Lougheed and I have in common. Because back in the 70s, when he formed what is arguably the best government that this province ever had.
I would say inarguably.
Inarguably, right? Yeah. And I'll say, like, a lot of my parents enthusiastically voted for Lougheed. They were big Lougheed
most
supporters.
People's parents did. That's the point.
Yeah. But here's what Lougheed and I have in common, okay? Because in the 70s, we were at a crossroads. At the time when he assumed office, Alberta was facing the prospect of running out of conventional oil and gas. And he asked the question, what next? And his answer was the oil sands and petrochemicals, but he understood that the change had to happen faster than the market could do. And the incumbents weren't interested in investing. So he embraced this notion of industrial policy led by the government in the public interest. And he used a mix of regulation, incentives, outright public ownership, and investment in things like research and development to commercialize and support private. And so, and in the process, he created our petrochemical industry, which hadn't really existed before. And he expanded our oil sands industry, which was very small. And so what I'm saying is that in 2024, as a result of the unfolding global energy transition, which is real, not just a political talking point, we're at a similar crossroads, and we need to learn the lessons of Naheed and actually pivot towards new opportunities.
Thank you for joining us on this very special all politics edition of the Best of Real Talk. If you like what you've seen or heard and you want to support the show, number one, thanks for subscribing to the podcast and to YouTube. Thanks for telling your friends about this interview. You can check out our website, ryanjesperson.com, and under the Connect link, you'll find how you can support us on Patreon as well. And don't forget, you can catch us streaming live on YouTube and Mixlr every weekday morning at 8:30 Mountain or later on demand.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Brandy Morin, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harman Candola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjesperson.com.